My ex-wife stood up at my wedding the second the priest said, "Speak now." But she didn't say the words I'd been dreading for 5 years. I'm David Alden, 38, standing under an autumn arch in my grandmother's garden, marrying Grace, the woman who taught me how to sleep through the night again. 200 guests, my mother in the front row, crying the good kind of tears. The priest smiles, opens his mouth, and says the line every groom hears and nobody ever expects to matter. If anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace. And in the back row, a woman in a gray dress rises. Naomi, my ex-wife, the woman who ended our 9-year marriage with a signed divorce petition on the kitchen counter and 4 words. There's someone else, David. No fight, no tears, just gone. My best man moved to block her. My mother stood up like she was ready to throw her out herself. My hands went cold, because after 5 years of hating that woman, I still hadn't forgiven her. And now she was going to burn down the only good thing I had left. But Naomi didn't look at me like a woman here to object. She looked at me like a woman about to hand something back. I'm not here to stop this wedding, she said, voice shaking. I'm here because I made a promise. And then, I swear on everything. My bride turned to me, calm as a Sunday morning. Grace didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She lifted the microphone off the stand, walked down the altar steps in her wedding dress, and put it in my ex-wife's hands. Tell him, Grace said softly, like you promised me. 200 people gasped at once. I couldn't breathe, because my bride and my ex-wife had met before, and neither of them had told me. Let me take you back, just for a moment, so you understand what that gray dress meant to me. 9 years. That's how long Naomi and I were married. She was the girl who ate cereal at midnight standing over the sink, the woman who named our beat-up car Bruce and talked to it when it wouldn't start, the one who used to press her cold feet against my legs in winter and laugh when I yelped. For 9 years, I thought we were the couple other couples were jealous of. Then came the week that split my life in 2. I remember it like a photograph I can't burn. It was a Tuesday in October, 5 years ago almost to this exact day. I came home early with champagne in one hand and the biggest news of my life in the other. The firm had offered me the position I'd chased for a decade. The dream job. The one Naomi had sat up with me for, night after night, quizzing me before interviews, ironing my lucky shirt, telling me, "It's coming, David. I can feel it." I walked through that front door shouting her name like a kid on Christmas morning. And the house was quiet. On the kitchen counter, under her wedding ring, was a folder, divorce papers, already signed. Her handwriting on every line, steady and neat, like she'd practiced. She was standing by the window with her coat on. Her suitcase was by the door. And when I asked her, when I begged her, to tell me this was a joke, she looked me straight in the eyes and said the 4 words that rewired my entire heart. There's someone else, David. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it was that impossible. Naomi didn't lie. Naomi cried at dog food commercials. Naomi held my hand at my father's funeral for 6 hours without letting go once. But she just stood there, pale and thin. She'd been losing weight for weeks, and God forgive me, in that moment I told myself it was because of him, whoever he was. Who? I asked. Just tell me who. It doesn't matter, she said. It's done. And here's the part that haunted me for 5 years. Right before she walked out, she stopped. She turned around. She reached up and touched my face, slowly, both hands, her thumbs moving across my cheekbones, like she was reading me in Braille, like she was memorizing me. You don't touch someone like that when you're leaving them for another man. You touch someone like that when you're saying goodbye forever. But I was too broken to see it. She walked out, and Bruce's engine turned over in the driveway, and that was the last time I saw my wife, until she stood up at my wedding in a gray dress. The years after were ugly. I won't dress it up. I took the dream job because it was the only thing I had left, and I threw myself into it, like a man trying to drown in the right direction. My mother cursed Naomi's name at every family dinner. My friends deleted her number. I kept exactly 1 photo of her, hidden in a shoebox in my closet. And I'm not proud of how many nights, in that first year, I took it out just to ask it why. There were clues, you know. I see them now like landmines lighting up in the dark. The weight she lost. The afternoon, 2 weeks before she left, when I came out of the grocery store and saw her sitting in Bruce in the parking lot, crying so hard her shoulders were shaking. When I knocked on the window, she wiped her face in half a second and smiled and said, "Sad song on the radio." I believed her. The pill bottle I found once in her gym bag that she snatched away and said was vitamins. Her sister Ruth suddenly calling every single day. Naomi disappearing for work trips that her office, I found out later, had no record of. I built all of those clues into a story about an affair, because that was the story she handed me. I never once imagined the real one. Then, 2 years ago, Grace happened. And I mean happened, like weather, like sunrise. She was the physical therapist assigned to my shoulder after I tore it doing something stupid at the gym. She had this way of asking questions that went straight past your skin. Third session, she looked at me and said, "Your shoulder's healing fine. Whatever's in your chest isn't." Who was she? Nobody had ever asked me like that. Not with pity, with interest. Like my broken pieces were worth studying, not stepping around. Grace taught me to sleep again. Taught me that loving someone new doesn't mean the old love was fake. It means you survived it. She never competed with a ghost. She just kept showing up, warm and steady and honest. Until one morning I woke up and realized the first face in my mind was hers. When I proposed, I told her everything about Naomi. The papers on the counter. The 4 words. The 5 years of hate I carried like a stone in my coat pocket. Grace listened to the whole thing without blinking. And then she asked me one strange question I didn't understand until my wedding day. She said, "David, if you ever found out the story was different than you think, would you want to know? Even if it hurt?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. I thought it was a hypothetical. It wasn't. So now you understand what I was feeling. Standing under that autumn arch, watching my bride, in her wedding dress, on our wedding day, place a microphone into the hands of the woman who detonated my life. The garden had gone so quiet I could hear the leaves. 200 people frozen mid-breath. Somewhere behind me, my mother whispered, "David, what is happening?" And I had no answer, because my whole body was ringing like a struck bell. Naomi held the microphone with both hands, the way you'd hold something you're afraid to drop. She looked thinner than I remembered, but different thinner, not sick thin. Her hair was shorter, and pinned to her gray dress, small and easy to miss, was a little gold ribbon. I didn't know yet what that ribbon meant. Half the guests probably did. She looked at Grace first, and Grace nodded at her, gently, like they'd rehearsed this, like they were friends. My stomach dropped through the earth. Then Naomi turned to me. "David," she said, and my name in her voice after 5 years hit me like cold water. "I promised your bride 3 weeks ago that I would stand up today. I promised her I'd finally say out loud the thing I swore I'd take to my grave. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Grace told me she was going to a vendor meeting about flowers, and came home quiet, red-eyed, and hugged me for a full minute at the door, without saying why. I'd assumed wedding stress. Before I say it," Naomi continued, and her voice cracked down the middle, "I need you to know one thing first, because you'll want to interrupt me, and I need you to hold on until the end. Can you do that?" I couldn't speak. I nodded. 200 people nodded with me. She took a breath that I could hear through the speakers, shaky and thin. 5 years ago, I told you there was someone else." The words landed on the garden like frost. My mother made a sound low in her throat. My best man's hand closed on my shoulder. "David." Naomi's eyes filled, and she didn't wipe them. She let them fall in front of everyone. There was never anyone else. There was never a single day, in 9 years of marriage, that there was anyone else. I lied to you. The garden erupted. Gasps, one chair scraping, my aunt saying, "Oh my God," out loud. My knees actually dipped. Grace's hand found the small of my back and held me up, and I realized she'd positioned herself there on purpose. She knew I'd need catching. Then why? The words tore out of me before I could stop them, raw and loud, no microphone needed. 5 years of asking a photograph, and now the photograph was standing in front of me. "Naomi, why? Why would you?" She held up one hand. "Hold on until the end. I'd promised. The week you got your job offer," she said slowly. "The week you came home with champagne. I'd already known for 6 days that I was sick. the gold ribbon on her dress. My eyes went to it, and the whole world tilted. Not a little sick, David. The kind of sick where doctors stop looking at you and start looking at their folders. The kind where they give you numbers, and the numbers are bad. She swallowed. I sat in that parking lot in Bruce and cried, and you knocked on the window, and I told you it was a sad song on the radio. I heard myself make a sound I've never made before. Behind me, my mother had both hands over her mouth. And I watched you that night, Naomi went on, and now she was speaking directly to me, like the 200 people had disappeared, holding that champagne, glowing about that job, the job I watched you bleed for 10 years. And I knew, with total certainty, exactly what you would do the second I told you. You would call them the next morning and turn it down. You would spend the next 3 years in hospital waiting rooms holding my hand while I disappeared piece by piece. And if I died, when I died, because that's what they told me, you would be left with nothing. No wife, no dream, no life. Just a stack of medical bills and a hollow where a future used to be. She stopped. The microphone shook in her hands. So I gave you the one wound I knew you wouldn't try to heal. I couldn't see anymore. The garden had gone blurry and hot. I told you I loved someone else, because it was the only lie big enough to make you let go of me. Because you would have fought a disease for me, David. You would have fought God for me. But another man? She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. Another man, you'd hate. And your hate would keep you free. Somewhere in the third row, a groomsman, a grown man I've watched break his hand and not flinch, was openly crying. I did the treatments alone, Naomi said quietly. Well, almost alone. Ruth knew. Only Ruth. She sat with me through every chemo chair, every scan, every 3 a.m. floor of every bathroom. And in those chemo chairs, David, her voice finally broke completely, and she had to stop and press her lips together and breathe. In those chairs, I wrote you letters. Every session. Letters I never sent. 62 of them. About Bruce. About your father. About how the nurses got tired of hearing your name. 62 letters. 5 years of my hate, and she was writing me love letters from a chemo chair. I kept them in a shoebox, she whispered, because I promised myself that if I lived, if by some miracle I lived, I'd find a way to make sure they reached you when it couldn't hurt you anymore. And then Naomi lifted her eyes past me, to my bride. 3 weeks ago, she said, I gave that shoebox to Grace. Every head in that garden turned to Grace at the same moment. My bride, standing in white, tears sliding silently down her face, completely unashamed, and I realized she'd read all 62 letters. She'd known everything. She'd carried this for 3 weeks, planned our wedding, smiled through cake tastings, while holding the truth that was about to remake my entire life. Grace stepped forward. She took my hand. Her fingers were trembling, but her eyes were steady, and she said the words that stopped my heart. David, before I tell you why I asked her to come today, you need to know what she said to me when she handed me that box. Because it's the reason I couldn't marry you without doing this. She turned to face the guests, and to face me, and took a breath. And what my bride said next didn't just explain the last 3 weeks. It changed the way I understand love. Forever. Grace stood beside me in her wedding dress, holding my hand like an anchor, and faced 200 silent people. 3 weeks ago, she said, I got a message from a woman I'd never met. It said, you don't know me, but I was married to the man you're about to marry. I'm not writing to cause trouble. I'm writing because there's something you deserve to have before your wedding day. 10 minutes. A coffee shop. That's all I ask. Grace let out a small, shaky laugh. I almost didn't go. Every friend I told said, don't. She's the ex. She wants him back. It's a trap. And honestly, I walked into that coffee shop ready for a fight. I'd heard the stories, David. Your mother's version. Your version. The woman who left you with signed papers and 4 cruel words. I went there to protect you. She looked at Naomi. Something passed between them. The kind of look that only exists between 2 people who have cried in front of each other. And instead, I found a woman sitting in the corner booth with a shoebox on the table and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't ask about you. She didn't ask if you were happy. She said she already knew you were, because she'd seen it in your face, once, from across a street, and it was the best day of her whole recovery. I felt that like a fist. Naomi had seen us. Somewhere out there. Some ordinary afternoon. My ex-wife had watched me laughing with Grace and called it the best day of her recovery. She slid the box across the table. Grace continued. And she said, "I'm not here to take him back. I'm here to make sure you know exactly what kind of man you're marrying. He's not a man who was betrayed. He's a man who was loved beyond reason. And he doesn't know it. Love him like that. He's already proven he can survive losing everything. Make sure he never has to prove it again." Grace's voice wavered for the first time. Then she stood up to leave. She was going to just walk out of both our lives forever. Let you hate her until the day she died. So you'd never feel guilty, never look back, never hurt. Grace turned to me now, and there were tears running down through her makeup, and she didn't care. I went home that night, and I read all 62 letters, David. I sat on our bathroom floor until 4 in the morning, reading love letters written to my fiancé from a chemo chair, by a woman everyone taught me to hate. She pressed her hand flat against my chest, right over my heart. And somewhere around letter 40, I realized something that terrified me. I realized I was about to marry half a man. Not because you don't love me, I know you love me, but because there's a locked room in here. She tapped my chest, with 5 years of hate inside it. And hate takes up space, David. It takes up space that belongs to us. She swallowed hard. So I called her back, and she said no. She said, "The lie is the last gift I can give him. Don't take it away." And I told her. Grace's voice cracked wide open. I told her, "I don't want to marry his body while a lie is holding his heart. I want all of him. And you're the only person on earth who can give me the rest." The garden was not quiet anymore. It was full of the sound of people trying not to sob, and failing. My aunt, my best man, the photographer, for God's sake, lowering his camera to wipe his eyes. "So I made her promise," Grace whispered. "Come to the wedding, and when the priest asks, stand up." She looked at me with everything she had. "This is my wedding gift to you, David." The truth, I couldn't afford anything bigger. I don't fully remember deciding to move. I just know that my legs carried me down off that altar, past the flowers, past 200 faces, straight to Naomi, and I stopped in front of her, and 5 years of carefully constructed hatred just collapsed. Like a building with its foundation pulled out. And what was underneath wasn't anger. It was grief. Oceans of it. Grief for her, alone in those chairs. Grief for the goodbye we never got to have. Grief for the man I'd been for 5 years, cursing a woman who was fighting for her life, and writing my name in letters she'd never send. "You were dying," I said, and my voice came out wrecked, barely human. "You were dying, and you let me hate you." Naomi looked up at me, and she smiled through her tears. That same smile from the last morning, the one I'd spent 5 years trying to forget. "Your hate kept you free," she said softly. It was the only gift I had left. And I broke. I pulled her into my arms in front of everyone. Not like a lover, God. No, like a man finally allowed to grieve at a funeral that happened 5 years too late. She was so much smaller than I remembered. She gripped the back of my suit jacket with both fists and shook. And I felt 5 years of held breath leave her body. And I said the only thing there was to say. I said it over and over into her hair. "I forgive you. I forgive you. Do you hear me? I forgive you. And I'm so sorry you were alone." "I wasn't alone," she whispered against my shoulder. "I had 62 conversations with you. You just weren't there for them. If you had told me that morning that the hardest I would cry on my wedding day would be in the arms of my ex-wife, with my bride watching and nodding, I'd have called you insane. But that's what love actually looks like sometimes. It doesn't look like the movies. It looks like a garden full of strangers weeping over a shoebox. And then I heard footsteps on the grass behind me. My mother. You have to understand. My mother, Eleanor Alden, is a proud, granite-hearted woman who had spent 5 years referring to Naomi exclusively as that woman. She had thrown away every photo. She once left a restaurant because Naomi's favorite song came on. She walked up to us slowly, and Naomi saw her coming and stiffened like she was bracing for a blow. My mother stopped in front of her. Her chin was trembling. The only part of my mother that ever admits defeat. 5 years, my mother said, her voice thick. I cursed your name at my dinner table. I know, Naomi whispered. I heard about it. I was glad. You were glad? It meant it was working. My mother stared at her for a long, long moment. And then this 70-year-old woman, who does not hug, who greets her own sisters with a handshake, opened her arms and pulled my ex-wife into her chest and held her like a daughter, and said loud enough for the microphone to catch it, "You went through that alone, rather than let my son suffer. You're not that woman anymore. You're family. You hear me? You will always have a chair at my table, and I am going to spend the rest of my life apologizing to it." There are moments when you can feel a whole crowd of people become better versions of themselves at the same time. That was one of them. When we finally pulled apart, when the tissues had been passed down every row, the priest, a kind, round man named Father Callahan, who had married half our town, cleared his throat, and everyone realized at once there was still a wedding to finish. I walked back up to that altar a different man than the one who'd walked down from it. Lighter, like I'd been carrying a stone in my coat pocket for 5 years, and someone had finally told me I was allowed to set it down. Grace was waiting for me, mascara streaked, radiant, holding both my hands the second I was close enough. "You risked our wedding," I said to her quietly. "You risked everything. Us. To heal me. What if I'd looked at her and felt something? What if the truth had changed things? Did you think about that?" "Every night, for 3 weeks," Grace said simply. "And I decided I'd rather lose you whole than keep you broken." Then she smiled. That crooked, fearless smile I fell in love with in a physical therapy office, and said, "Now, are you going to marry me with your whole heart, David Alden, or half of one? Because I ordered a very expensive cake and I intend to eat it married." The whole garden laughed. That wet, relieved, grateful laughter that only comes after tears. And Father Callahan wiped his own eyes with his sleeve, straightened his stole, and said, "Well, in 30 years of weddings, I have never had to ask this twice, but the law of the church is the law of the church." He raised his voice, and there was a twinkle in it. "If anyone here objects to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Every single head in that garden turned to the same place. Because Naomi wasn't in the back row anymore. Grace had done one more thing without telling me. She'd had an usher move Naomi's chair to the front row, and next to my mother. Naomi stood up one more time. 200 people held their breath one more time. She looked at me, she looked at Grace, and she said, clear and strong into the autumn air, "Not me, I'm the one giving him away." Then she sat down, and my mother took her hand, and did not let go of it for the entire ceremony. I have heard wedding vows my whole life. I've mumbled through them at cousins' weddings, checked my watch through them at co-workers, but I'm telling you, when I took Grace's hands and said those ancient words, they weighed 1,000 pounds each. In the best way. For better, for worse. I knew what worse looked like now. In sickness and in health. I looked at Naomi in the front row when I said that part, and she nodded at me, once, like she was passing something on. "Till death do us part." I said it to Grace, looking straight into her eyes, and I meant it the way only a man who almost lost everything can mean it. Not as a poem, but as a plan. And when Father Callahan said, "You may kiss the bride," the cheer that went up from that garden scattered birds out of the oak trees, and my best man cried harder than the flower girl. And somewhere in the front row, my mother and my ex-wife were holding each other up, laughing and sobbing at the same time. And the autumn light came through the leaves in gold pieces, and I kissed my wife. My whole heart, both hands, nothing held back, nothing locked away. That night at the reception, under string lights, Naomi tried to slip out early. Grace caught her at the gate. I watched it happen from across the yard, and physically walked her back to the head table, and made a space, and the three of us sat together while my uncle butchered a toast, and at some point Naomi leaned over and said to Grace, "You know, when I gave you that box, I thought I was giving him away." And Grace said, "You weren't giving him away. You were giving him back. There's a difference." I danced with my wife that night, until the band gave up, and near the end, the singer called for one last slow song, and Grace put my hand in Naomi's, and said, "Go on. You two never got a last dance. Everybody deserves a last dance." So I danced one song with my ex-wife, both of us laughing and crying, while my wife stood at the edge of the floor with my mother, watching, glowing, her arms crossed like a woman admiring her own finished work. Because that's exactly what it was. 1 year later, almost to the day, same town, different garden, ours now, a little house Grace and I bought with a crooked porch and an oak tree out back. It's autumn again. The leaves are doing that gold thing they do, and there's a christening happening. Our daughter was born in September. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, my stubborn chin, Grace's fearless eyes. In the hospital, when the nurse asked for the name, Grace looked at me, and I looked at her, and we didn't even have to discuss it, because we'd known for months. Hope Naomi Alden. And standing at the front of our church, holding our daughter in her arms as the water touched that tiny forehead, was her godmother, 5 years in remission now, cleared at her last 3 scans, hair long again, wearing a yellow dress because she says she's done with gray forever. Naomi cried through the entire ceremony. My mother stood beside her passing her tissues, because that's what family does. The shoebox, those 62 letters, sits on the shelf in our living room, not hidden in a closet. Right there, between our wedding photo and Hope's first hospital bracelet. When people visit and ask about it, Grace tells them the whole story, every time, start to finish. And she always ends it the same way. Our marriage was built on the day the truth set him free. We don't hide that. We honor it. Some nights, when Hope won't sleep, I walk her around the living room, and I pass that shelf, and I think about it all. About a woman in a chemo chair, writing letters she'd never send. About a bride who risked her own wedding to hand her groom back his whole heart. About my mother's chair at the table. About how close I came to living my entire life inside a lie. A lie built out of the biggest love I never saw. My ex-wife stood up at my wedding when the priest said, "Speak now." And instead of ruining it, she finished the love story she started 5 years ago, by making sure mine could truly begin. Here's what I keep coming back to, and I want to ask you, honestly, before you go. Naomi believed the kindest thing she could do was lie, to carry the whole weight alone, so I could be free. Grace believed the kindest thing she could do was force the truth into the open, even if it blew up her own wedding. 2 women, 2 completely opposite choices, both made purely out of love. So tell me, if someone you loved was suffering, would you protect them with a beautiful lie, or would you hand them a painful truth? And harder still, if someone did to you what Naomi did to David, 5 years of letting you hate them to keep you free, could you forgive them the way he did? Or would the lie itself be unforgivable? No matter the reason, drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise you, the answers to this question will move you as much as the story did. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe, and please, tap the notification bell if you haven't already, because stories like this one drop every week, and I'd hate for you to miss the next one. And listen, before you go, if there's someone in your life you've been holding anger against, someone whose full story you might not actually know, maybe today's the day you ask. Because sometimes the people we resent the most are the ones who loved us in ways we never saw. Don't wait 5 years and a wedding to find out. Love the people in front of you. Forgive the ones behind you. And never ever assume you know the whole story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose locked room you might open. See you in the next story.